Hey friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm out here in the car. I just had to run some errands this morning. We're in a winter wonderland. We've had some snow. There was a winter storm here in our area of Ohio this week, and thankfully, the most of it missed us here. We were supposed to get a really bad ice storm, followed by quite a bit of snow accumulation, and the ice missed us, and the snow accumulation wasn't nearly what they forecasted, but we did have Adam home for a couple days. The university was closed, so that was nice. We sort of just had some snow days this week, and so that will be reflected in our meals. I tend to do less rigid meal planning when Adam is home. We tend to be much more spontaneous on both when meals happen and what we're having, because we sleep in a little more, breakfast might be a little later, and then we don't feel like having a big lunch because we slept in. It's just all, the schedule gets thrown out. But speaking of scheduling, I thought that this week I would show you how I do my meal planning in a normal week. And so I'm going to take you through, I'm going to show you that process during a pantry challenge, what we do to plan our meals, and then you'll see kind of how we deviated throughout the week. For the most part, I'd say we did about 75% of the planned meals, but sometimes you can't account for the amount of leftovers you'll have left over, or other things that pop up, and so we tend to, we'll make the planned meal list, and then sometimes we switch around. So what we planned for Thursday, we might end up having on Tuesday, or vice versa, and things just kind of happen that way. But anyways, it is the first week of the Three Rivers Challenge here in February, and we're still going strong here in our house. I hope that you guys are enjoying the challenge as well. Make sure you check the hashtag in the description to see everybody else who's participating. For now, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what we made this week. The first thing I do to meal plan during a pantry challenge is I make a list of things I need to use up, either things that are on the pantry shelves that are kind of forgotten, or random things I found in the freezer. And this was my list this week of things that are kind of forgotten and that needed. So I take this combined with all of my inventories, and I just start to make a plan. I get out my planner, and then I have these cute little crock pot stickers from Planner Kate. And the first thing I do is indicate any days on my meal plan that I know I need to do a crock pot meal. So that would be gymnastics night for us during this week. So I'm just going to put a little crock pot sticker there to remind me to make a crock pot meal that night. Okay, and then the next thing I do is I'm going to write in just the nights or the days that we always do the same thing. So we always have tacos on Tuesday, and this week I'm going to use up one of the beef tongues to make our tacos because beef tongue taco is amazing. And then in the previous day's meal prep, I need to remind myself to get that in the crock pot so it'll be ready for lunch. And then I'm going to do the same thing for Thursday night. It's usually our pizza night for the boys, and then I remind myself the day before to thaw that pizza meat so it will be ready for David to make his pizza. And then I always indicate on Friday that I need to make room for David to bake because he always does that. And then I need to remind myself to juice some lemons on Monday. So the next thing I'm going to do is just start going down my list and finding things that I want to use up. I had that leftover Swiss steak and some beets, so I'm going to make borscht in the crock pot on Wednesday night, and that will be the meal for that night. And then I have some raw squash that needs used up, so we're going to make a spaghetti squash casserole on Monday night's dinner. And I have some other things that I can use to help make that squash casserole. I have some sorghum and a lot of freezer jam to use up. So we're going to make a sorghum porridge with freezer jam for Monday's breakfast. And then I have some mulberries, tons of homegrown mulberries to use up. So we're going to make a mulberry cobbler for breakfast on Tuesday. Next, there is a bag of frozen whole tomatoes that was on my list. So I'm going to make sure to make some sauce from those tomatoes on Monday and use that in that spaghetti squash casserole. Also, I have some corn, dried corn that needs used up. So we're going to have Johnny cakes, which are corn pancakes. So I'm reminding myself to grind that to be ready for Friday's breakfast. We also have some oat groats that need used and cycled through. So I'm going to make blueberry muffins out of oat flour, and I'll grind those oat groats the day before just to make sure I have them all ready for Wednesday morning breakfast. Next, I have some frozen watermelon from last summer that I just stuck in the freezer. So for Wednesday's lunch, we're just going to have snacks and watermelon slushies. I have tons of wild rice to use up. So Tuesday night dinner, we'll do salmon and wild rice. Next, I found some frozen cherry pie filling in the freezer. So let's make a cherry pie Tuesday night with dinner. That'll help get some of that out of the freezer. And look, my list, everything that I wanted to use up, I found a place for it in this week's meal plan so far. But I'm not done yet. There are still some gaps in my meal plan that I need to fill in. So in the beginning of my planner, and I've done a video on this planner before that I'll link in the description, but I have a master list of just popular breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and then desserts and snacks that I can choose from. These are meals that I basically know I have the ingredients for these in the house. So what I do is I kind of go through when I'm making my meal plan and find things we haven't had in a while, and I add those to the gaps in my meal plan. So here it is. I decided we have potatoes to use up. So we're going to have potato pizzas on Monday night for lunch, or I'm sorry, Monday afternoon for lunch. I added that in there. Going down the list, I already showed you all of these items. These were things that I had planned to use up that we found room for in the meal plan. You can see all of these. Okay, I'm going to make an egg casserole to use up water-glassed eggs. We're going to have tuna salad because I have lots of cans of tuna to use. And then, of course, that pizza, the Johnny cakes. And then on lunch on Friday, we'll just do a fridge dump soup, clear the fridge out of all the leftovers from the week. And then I have lots of ham hocks that I need to use up. So for Friday night's dinner, I figured why not do a ham hock and some beans. And then in my next column, you can see I've made a note of all the meal prep I need to do. So on Monday's meal prep, that is mostly for Tuesday's meals. Tuesday's meal prep is mostly preparing for Wednesday's meals, and so on. And that's just a way to keep myself on track, make sure things are thawed, make sure all the grains are ground. It just keeps me on track. And then my next thing I need to do today is go through and fill in my chores, things I need to do for the children, homeschool lessons, and my social media work. I sit down and do this planning every Sunday afternoon, and this just gets me on track for Monday as we start the week. I do not meal plan for weekends because we like to be a little bit more spontaneous when Adam is home, and we just kind of eat whatever we fancy during that time. All right, it is Sunday night, and I could not find my bucket of sorghum. I have no idea where the sorghum went, so we're having oats instead. I'm making some oatmeal. I always soak my oats. This breaks down the phytic acid in it and makes it better to digest, helps you use the nutrients more in the oats. You just want to add something acidic. I'm adding just a little bit of lemon juice here to the water. You could add whey if you can have dairy in your house. You can also do apple cider vinegar. And that acid is what helps break down that phytic acid. And we're just going to let this sit out overnight on the counter. And then in the morning, all we have to do is drain out that water, and then we can get these oats cooking. So here it is, Monday morning. That's what it looks like. The oats kind of expand and soak in some of the water. We're going to get that water drained out. And to my oats today, we are going to add freezer jam. In 2020, I was low on canning lids and decided not to waste lids canning jam. So instead, I made freezer jam so that I could reuse lids. But the problem is, as 2020 and 2021 went on, I totally forgot about this freezer jam in the back of the freezer. And I canned more jam and started using that instead. So I'm going to use 3 jars of this peach freezer jam that I made in 2020. Looks like the sugar settled in the bottom of that one. That's interesting. But anyways, this is what I'm going to use to sweeten my oatmeal. And that'll give it a wonderful peach flavor. And then the sugar in this will be our sweetener, so I don't need to add any additional sweetener to the oatmeal. This is just a great way to use these up so they don't go to waste. I also have a little bit of apple cider left in the fridge, so I'm going to go ahead and add that as some liquid too. And then here's some egg whites that are left over from making some mayonnaise. And we're going to stir these in too to add a little protein to our oatmeal as well. You just stir it in while the oatmeal is cold, get it stirred very thoroughly, and then you won't even notice those eggs in there. So this is what it looks like all mixed together. We're just going to let this cook on low while the kids are waking up here. Just a really easy breakfast. I like to do some kind of breakfast cereal for Monday mornings because I find we're tired and I'm not feeling very energetic in the kitchen, so this is a really easy meal to ease us into the week. Adding a little cinnamon because why not? It goes great with the peach and the apple flavor in there, and my kids love it. Just a nice warm comfort meal on a very cold, slow Monday morning around here. Typically when I plate this up, I just put a small amount in each bowl, and then many of my children will go back for seconds. So here's what they're starting with, and then obviously the older children will have more. Baby's already digging in and loving it. My kids love oatmeal, and I love that it's such an easy meal to make, and it's full of good nutrition. And today it was such a great way to use up that freezer jam. I think that's my plan for the rest of the freezer jam that is still left in the freezer. Unfortunately, I did a very poor job in 2021's Pantry Challenge in using that up, and so I'm purposing to use it up this year, and that will help us out. All right, let's work on lunch now. So I have tons of potatoes to use up that are going to go soft if I don't use them here soon, and we're running low on flour. So I'm going to make, this is something that I started making in a pantry challenge several years ago when we ran out of flour and we wanted pizza. We call this potato pizzas. And all I do is I use my veggie spiralizer, and I take my potatoes and I spiralize them just like you would zucchini or any other vegetable. And we're going to make these into some hash browns. We're going to cook the hash browns, and that is going to be the crust of our pizza. It is delicious. When we tried this the first time during a pantry challenge, I wasn't sure about it. But after we ate it, it was so good, and the kids loved it so much that it kind of became a regular part of our meal rotation. Gracie here, the poor thing, this is a tool that's made for right-handed people, and she's left-handed, so she does a really good job trying her best to get these spiralized. So they're in long strings after you spiralize them, so I just take my kitchen scissors and try to chop them into smaller pieces to make it easier to cook these. And the scissors work great, so just going to go through and get them chopped up. In the meantime, the kids David went and grabbed an apple from storage. Our apples from October are still looking good in storage, and it's February, so that is a blessing. All right, let's get these hash browns all cooked up. I just tossed them with some oil in the pan on the stove, and we're just going to stir these around and try to get them softened a little bit. You don't want crunchy potato strings in the bottom of your pizza. You want those cooked. It looks like his buddy here wanted some apple too, and so David's going to have to share this apple that he just went out to the garage to get. I need to bring some inside so everybody can have apples right now. People ask what we do for snacks, and it is very often fruit, such as apples or right now the citrus that we have in the house. Okay, these are starting to cook up a little bit. They still need to go on a little bit more. I think Gracie decided she also wanted an apple, so she's going to run out and grab some and come inside. Now remember, not all apples store the same. And so when you're looking for apples to get you through the winter, always look for storage varieties. Fuji and is it Gala or Gala, however you pronounce that. Those are two great options for storage if your local orchard has that. But if you talk to your local orchardist, he will let you know which varieties that he or she grows that are best for storage. All right, let's work on our sauce for the potato pizzas. I have 2 cans of tomato paste here. We're going to pour in this pickled pepper juice. That'll give it some vinegary, peppery flavor. I love that pepper juice. Don't let it go to waste. We're going to add some oregano, some onion powder, some salt, and just get that all mixed up for our pizza sauce. And I am adding a lot more pepper juice to this sauce than I would for a traditional pizza, because to get this sauce to spread out on top of your hash browns, you need it a little more watery than a traditional sauce. So there we go. All of our softened potatoes are down in the bottom. I use little mini pie pans for the little kids, and then we use regular pie dishes for the big people in the house. And we just fill the bottom of the pie plate with it. And now we are simply going to spread the sauce on top. But let's also talk about the toppings that we're going to put on top of our pizza. So you can do anything with this. We typically do Italian sausage and then whatever preserved veggies and olives and things like that that we have in the house. So once again, there is our sauce. We have that Italian sausage that I was talking about. Our friend grows our pork for us, and we typically buy 3 pigs from him to fill our freezer for the year. And then we also chopped up some green olives. I have some green onions that are actually left from David's birthday was last Sunday. I didn't film that day, but he had requested a little veggie tray, and we had some green onions that were left from that. I broke my pantry challenge rule. Well, I didn't break the rules. I had said in the beginning that for kids' birthdays, if there was something they wanted for their meal that we didn't have in the house, we would go and purchase it. And David had requested brats and French fries and a veggie tray that night. So we have those veggies left over. We're also going to have anchovies. We buy lots of anchovies and keep them in the house because my kids have them on pizza every week. All right, so here's how you do this. And I'm trying it left-handed, one-handed, but I'm probably going to need to put the phone down to do this better. You just simply dollop some on there and try to spread it out as best you can over the top of the hash browns. And it's much easier when you're using 2 hands and your dominant hand. So here you go. This is what it kind of looks like. That is our sauce for the potato pizza. And then all the kids are just going to go and pick their toppings. Here's little Levi. He's my 5-year-old, and he chose anchovies, olives, and green onions for his. Oh, and sausage. So big boy likes to try it all. Here's everybody's pie plates all together. Everybody picks a different selection of toppings. And then we're just going to bake these in the oven on 350 for about 15 minutes. And then the kids really enjoy that. This is a wonderful meal. Great if you don't have flour in the house. Okay, we have 1 spaghetti squash, just 1 lonely spaghetti squash left over from last summer's garden. So we are going to use this for dinner tonight. I'm just cutting it in half. I spread a little olive oil on the cut part, and we're just going to bake this on the oven until it softens. And then in the meantime, I have this random bag of just a few tomatoes in there that I froze. I know that I probably intended on filling it and never did. And this bag is just sitting in my freezer. So frozen tomatoes, if you run them under hot water, the peels of them just slide right off. So I peeled them really quickly. We're going to add a pint of tomatoes and okra that I canned last year. And then we're going to add that to the tomatoes, cook them up together, and this will be our sauce for our squash casserole. So there you go. Pretty easy. A great way to use these tomatoes up. I still have no idea why I didn't fill that bag and why there was just 7 or 8 tomatoes in the bottom of the freezer, but we will use them. And here we go. Those have been cooking for a little while, and the tomatoes are starting to disintegrate. I'm working on a pie now. The kids chose peach pie. That's what they wanted. So just rolling out my dough, and we're going to use some of the pie filling that I canned. All right, here's our spaghetti squash all done. Ooh, it's hot. But now we're just going to scoop that out. Got our really ugly peach pie ready to go in the oven. It'll get the job done, even if it's not pretty. And to our sauce here, I have dehydrated squash and tomato powder. This was zucchini from last summer. And I'm just going to add some of that in there to kind of thicken the sauce up a little bit and add a little extra nutrition. We're also going to add some oregano to it. We're going to add some salt and pepper, of course, and then get that all stirred around, and that will be the sauce that we add to this casserole. This casserole is just a use up a bunch of random stuff kind of thing. So I put the squash on the bottom of my dish, and then I had 3 random pieces of lasagna that were left over from the lasagna I made several weeks ago, and they've just been sitting in the pantry. So why not add these to our casserole? We're just going to layer these on top of the squash. We're going to add some cooked bison to the top of the pasta, and then I'm just spreading that sauce mixture. Ugly as can be, but you know what? It'll fill bellies, and that's what matters. And it used up odds and ends that we needed to get out of the pantry. So everybody gets a little scoop of the casserole. Everybody wanted a little piece of pie. And what's so funny to me is that these ugly meals that are just slopped together are usually the meals that the kids eat the best. They literally cleared their plates this night. But there are nights where I'll plan these big, elaborate, beautiful, wonderful meals, use a new recipe that I think they're going to love, and people just pick at it and don't eat it. And then the nights where I just slap something together like this using odds and ends are the nights where everybody devours it. And if you look here, they must have liked it. So ugly or not, it'll obviously fill bellies and everybody's happy. It's a win. So let's start breakfast now. Today we are going to make a fruit cobbler. I need to use up frozen mulberries. We have lots of mulberry trees on our property and I freeze them every year and we need to do something with them. The liquid for our cobbler today, for that I'm going to use the juice from these cherries. These were an impulse buy at Aldi last December and they were delicious, but it's just been sitting in the fridge. This liquid just has the cherries, the water, and the sugar in it. So I'm going to cut the sugar in my cobbler recipe, and then we're going to use that in place of the other liquid. I also have a random jar with some peaches left in it, and then, of course, the frozen mulberries, and that's what we will use for our fruit. So once again, leaving out the milk or the water, and we're just going to use the cherry juice for our liquid in the cobbler, and that'll get that jar of cherries out of my fridge now, finally. Here's what that looked like all mixed together. The cherry juice gave it a really pretty purple color. And then as you can see, I just spread that there. All right. I made mayonnaise over the weekend to make a veggie dip for David's birthday, and I had a failed batch. If you make your own homemade mayonnaise, you know that sometimes you have a batch that will not emulsify. Now, because it had oil in it and it's been cold in the fridge, it's kind of hardened up a little bit, but it was pure liquid at room temperature and was not a mayonnaise texture to be used for our veggie dip. So I'm going to add this to my scrambled eggs today, and we're going to try to use this up so that it's not wasted in our egg casserole. I also have some leftover hash browns and some leftover mashed potatoes, some more of those green onions, and we're just going to make an egg casserole out of all of this. So there's that leftover mayo. I have some water glassed eggs here in the jar, and we're just going to add that to the mayo and stir it around really good. People have asked what I do with the shells from my water glassed eggs. I do feed those to the chickens because I rinse the outside. I get the lime mixture off of it, and the chickens will eat that. So there is the mayo and the egg all mixed together. We've got the potatoes on the bottom. We're just going to pour that on top, and then I'm going to slice up those green onions, and we're just going to sprinkle that on top of the eggs. And that will go nicely with our fruit cobbler for breakfast today. Give us a little protein. And it turned out delicious. The eggs were so fluffy with that mayo in it. I really enjoyed how that turned out. We are just about out of grapefruit. We're eating the last of that up for breakfast this week. So this is what it looked like all plated up. The kids really enjoyed this one. We have really been enjoying having that grapefruit. It's such a blessing to have that vitamin C. And everybody liked this. Hungry, hungry children. Even Benji's loving it. And then, of course, he's got his grapefruit juiced into a cup. Now, we are going to go back in time a little bit to the night before here. I pulled a tongue out of the freezer. This is a beef tongue. And I know it sounds gross, but hear me out on this. I took the tongue, and it's completely frozen. It's not thawed. Stuck it in my little crock pot and put a pint of home canned salsa in the crock pot with it. And we're just going to cook this on low overnight so it's ready for lunchtime the next day. This is what it looked like after it was all cooked. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do with this. We're going to serve it with some rice today. Make a little nacho meal out of the tongues, and it's going to be delicious. I promise you. If you've never had tongue, it is a muscle, just like any other cut of meat on a cow that is also a muscle. It makes the most tender roast beef. You can see how tender and juicy that meat is up there. The only thing you have to do is that there is a layer of skin over the top of it, and it peels right off. You can see how the corner of that is peeling, and I'm going to need somebody to hold the camera for me so I can show you how to do this. Now, I was trying to do this using utensils, but really the easiest way to do this is with your hands, pulling this off. So I gave up trying to do it the dignified way, and I'm just going to grab it and pull it. And as you can see, that layer of skin just comes right off the meat, and underneath it you have that delicious roast beef. So we're going to get all of that pulled off. This is only about half the meat on the tongue. It's a very long cut of meat. And what we're going to do is take the drippings from that. This has the salsa and the drippings from the meat, and we're going to cook our rice in it. we're taking the meat and we are chopping it up, and I put it in my stand mixer, and after you mix it in the mixer for a little bit, it shreds perfectly for you, and this is great on tacos. But I once again did not have the energy to make taco shells today, and actually I told you that it was David's birthday on Sunday, and with his brats and french fries and veggie tray that he had requested, Adam had also picked up a couple bags of chips. You can see we got into the blue chips, but nobody ate the regular corn chips that night. And so we decided that instead of making taco shells today, we're going to finish up the little bit of blue chips that were left, and we were going to go ahead and use up this bag of corn chips. So we are going to make some nachos with the beef tongue. Our toppings are candied jalapenos. We have some home canned taco sauce, and I used up the last of the peach hot sauce that was in the fridge. And these are the things that the kids can top their nachos with. And they are going to love this. I've got my helper here playing toys. Always someone at the counter with me when I'm cooking, which is wonderful. Elizabeth is finishing up school and she's doing her Bible reading for me while I'm finishing making the tacos. And I love it. It's so wonderful to have the children at the counter with me. All right, the food is all done. Our rice is here, cooling down. We've got our meat, we've got all our toppings, and we've got our chips, and all the kids can kind of make their own plates. This is what it looked like. The kids don't eat a whole ton of the meat on top of the nachos, and that is good because I am going to use the leftover meat for tomorrow's lunch. And there was David's plate, looking delicious. All right, let's get started working on dinner now. I'm going to make what I thought was a cherry pie. When I looked in my freezer, this looked like cherry pie to me. Just maybe I thought the seals had failed or something and I stuck them in the freezer. But I quickly realized when I opened the jars that this was not cherry pie filling. This was blueberry pie filling. And I have no idea when I made blueberry pie filling. But as I dug in the freezer a little more, I realized there's a whole batch of 7 quarts of pie filling in there for me to use up. So we are going to use it. And so I only needed one of these to fill my pie dish. So we will save the other jar of this and I will do something else with it this week. So once again, going to make a very ugly pie. I am not a great pie maker. I am noticing that this pie filling is rather watery. So I'm going to add a little bit of arrowroot powder to it to thicken it up. Arrowroot is a gluten-free option for thickening up gravies and pie fillings and things, and it works great. It's a nice alternative to cornstarch also. So I'm just stirring this in, and then that will thicken as it bakes. And there's what that looks like before it's going into the oven. Ugly, but tasty. All right, now let's work on dinner. I need to use up wild rice. I have this whole gallon jar that I haven't been very good about using, so we're going to use that up. Wild rice isn't technically a grain. I believe it is a seed. It has an earthy flavor and it is delicious. We're going to use up a quart here of beef broth. And then I also have some roast drippings. You can see the Italian seasoning on the bottom and then all of that flavor from the roast. So we're going to add that together. And it looks like there were even garlic cloves in the drippings from that roast. So that's going to taste delicious here with our wild rice. We've just got that on the stove cooking up. The wild rice will burst when it's done cooking, and that's how you'll know. I also grabbed from some spinach from the freezer, and I've just got that kind of melting down on the stove for me. And with this tonight, we are going to eat salmon, and I just put that in my pans here, sprinkled some Old Bay on top, and then I sliced some lemons to put on top of it too. Once again, I've got my John John with me for dinner. All right, so we're going to get this salmon cooked, and here is what everything looked like when it was all done. Nice, yummy, healthy meal. I always tend to default to regular rice, and I forget about this wild rice, but when we make it, I'm always like, oh, I need to make this more often because it is really good. And then here's that ugly but delicious blueberry pie. And now I just need to get it all plated up for the kids. I think they're going to enjoy this meal tonight. I'm trying to eat more seafood and chicken because we've been doing a lot of beef lately. So there we go. And tonight I need to grind some grains. These are oat groats. This is what the seed of the oat plant actually looks like before it's rolled out into old-fashioned oats. And this is what you use to grind into oat flour. You can't put rolled oats in your grain mill or it will gunk it up. We're also going to grind up some whole yellow corn today to make some cornmeal. We did blue corn last week, but we used up the last of that, so now we're moving on to the yellow corn. And here we go. I've got my cornmeal all ready for my Johnny cakes this week. We did some regular wheat berries, and then there is my oat flour. And I'm going to use the oat flour tomorrow morning to go ahead and make some muffins. This is my blueberry muffin recipe, and I'm just going to substitute oat flour 1 for 1, just the same amount of regular wheat flour that I would put in my recipe, and that is what we're using. Now, instead of adding sugar and instead of adding milk and blueberries, I am going to use this jar of blueberry pie filling that was sitting in the fridge that I said I needed to use up, and that will be a good substitution for all of those ingredients. So that's how it looks like when I mix that together, and then I am adding the rest of the ingredients. I did add the baking powder, I added the salt, I added the oil, the egg, and the vanilla, and I did double this recipe. But I did not do 2 jars of the pie filling, I only did 1. And once again, I left the sugar out and I left the liquid out because what was in the pie filling was more than enough for the recipe. And hey, it's an experiment. We'll see how this turns out. It's kind of fun to see what this will do in the oven. There we go. We got it all in our muffin tins. And while that's baking, we're going to work on some eggs. All right. Once again, I've got this leftover mayonnaise. It was a failed batch of mayonnaise. I'm still trying to work through this so it doesn't go to waste. I've got some eggs scrambled up here. And we're just going to, oh, I've got a helper helping me scramble. Hopefully he doesn't spill those eggs. Anyways, we added a couple dollops of that mayonnaise to it, and as you can see, that mayonnaise just really fluffs it up, makes really nice fluffy eggs. So I am very pleased with the results of that. I will never waste another batch of failed mayonnaise again. That will always be added to the eggs that we make in that week. And as you can see, this is this one pan has been very well seasoned and my eggs are not sticking today. I've been having terrible results with my cast iron. It all needs re-seasoned, but this pan's doing pretty good today. All right, and so that's how those muffins turned out. They were great. And we're going to have the rest of the mandarin oranges with it, and this will be breakfast. Now, oat flour does crumble a little bit more than wheat flour. It doesn't hold together exactly the same. So that, but otherwise tastes exactly like it. And if you are can't have gluten, if you make sure that whatever oats you're using are gluten-free, this is a great way to do some gluten-free baking. You can just grind that into flour. There you go. All right, we have that leftover meat from the nachos yesterday, and I have just a little bit of barbecue sauce sitting in the fridge. It's been sitting in there for months now and needs used up. So we're going to pour that on top of the rest of that beef tongue. And we're going to eat this with crackers today for lunch. And then in the summer, whenever we have a little bit of watermelon left over from a big watermelon, I tend to just stick it in the freezer and it gets forgotten about. So today is the day we are going to use this watermelon up. We're going to make some slushes out of it. I'm just going to chunk it and get it into the blender. And then I'm going to put some lemon juice in there. And I also ended up, I had just a little bit of homemade lemonade left in the fridge and I decided to blend that in it too. And look at that. It's like a watermelon slushie. Between the lemonade and the watermelon flavor, it tastes just like summer. And I had my taste tester approve. I think the kids are going to love this. So that's a great way to use up frozen watermelon. So there we go. There's our barbecued beef. We've got some crackers, some navel orange slices, and our watermelon slushies. Just an easy snack lunch. Quick and easy for the kids, often the best kinds of lunches. So let's see how he likes the tongue meat with the barbecue sauce. Does my taste tester approve? I think it was kind of hot, but he liked the flavor of it. So that'll do. It'll fill bellies. Time for dinner. Okay, we are going to make a Borscht-Like soup, and here are the ingredients I'm going to use. I have some beets here that I'm going to peel and slice up. These are the beets that I got in January that I'm trying to process. I have some leftover potatoes from a meal a couple days ago. We have the last of those green onions. We have some bay leaves, a quart of canned carrots from last year's garden, I believe. And we're going to add that to the soup. I also have some Swiss steak left over from last week that I haven't done anything with, so I need to get that out of the fridge, and we're going to add that to the borscht. I also have a quart of onion broth, and that'll give a great onion flavor, and then we just have a little cube of garlic puree. We're going to get all this put together. I think I'm also going to add another quart of beef broth, and we'll be good. So I started by chopping up my peeled beets. I added those green onions in there and then that frozen garlic cube, and we're just going to get this all sauteing up. I put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of that pan too. And while that's cooking, then we're going to add the potatoes in there. Those were already pre-cooked, but we're just sticking them in there. And then we have the canned carrots. We're putting them in there with the carrot broth and all. And that will also cook into there. Adding our onion broth. Yummy, yummy. It's smelling good. Then I decided, like I said, to add another quart of home canned beef broth. And then we need to add our seasonings. We added some bay leaves. Get those stirred in there. And then, of course, we added our salt and pepper. And I'm currently using up my pink Himalayan salt. I have like 50 pounds that I need to go through, so. All right, and so that's just going to simmer on the stove for a while. And then I also chopped up all of the Swiss steak into littler bites, and then we'll throw that into the pot with all the veggies. And then this will just simmer for a little bit until I think those beets are adequately cooked and all the flavors have kind of mixed in together and cooked adequately. So borscht is a very brave meal to make with a lot of small children. It is extremely messy. So if you are a large family and a mom of little ones, I would just caution you to never serve this anywhere where things can be stained, because that beet juice will definitely stain. All right, here's what it looks like in the bowl. So pretty, that vibrant red color. I love it, and it tastes so delicious. As you can see, I put less broth in the baby's bowl because he is just going to make a mess, and as I mentioned, it will end up everywhere and it will stain any clothing that it comes in contact with. So we typically have someone help feed Benji. Usually it's me, but I was taping or videoing, and as soon as I was done videoing, I took it back over. But as you can see, he loved it. Benji actually ate 3 full bowls of this soup. So if a 19-month-old will eat the cooked beets, it must be pretty good. And then that night for dessert, we decided to have some homemade hot cocoa and marshmallow fluff. A snowstorm was brewing, and so that was just a lovely thing in front of the fire to have as dessert. All right, let's make breakfast again. Today we are making Johnny cakes. These are pancakes that are made out of corn flour, and I'm just using my regular pancake recipe and subbing out. I'm using the rest of the oat flour that I have and all of this corn flour. And what I did is I measured it into my bowl, and then based on how much I have, then I added the appropriate amount of the other ingredients. So I could quadruple this pancake recipe based on the amount of flour I had. So that's what I did. I added all of those ingredients, except for if I quadrupled it, I would have needed 8 eggs, but instead of that, I put 5 eggs in and none of the oil, and I added a jar of apple butter in place because I need to start using up some of this apple butter. And you might not know this, but applesauce subs perfectly for oil and for eggs. So that's a great way to use that up and to not use our eggs right now. So there we go. I'm just sitting here flipping corn cakes here this morning. As you can see, little boy's got a haircut the day before. I finally had a chance to cut their hair. So I've got my silly little boy here entertaining me, and I'm just flipping corn cakes, getting them ready for breakfast. And we had Adam home this morning because the university was canceled due to the snowstorm, so he was able to enjoy some corn cakes with us. Now, they can be kind of dry. The corn flour can be drier, so we just add maple syrup on top, and that soaks in, and it's perfect. The kids really enjoyed this. Another gluten-free option between the oat flour and the corn flour. Another little boy that got a haircut. Oh, it was much needed. That haircut was long overdue. These boys were shaggy, so gave the girls a little trim, got the boys all cleaned up. All right, now we need to grind some more flour. So I've got wheat berries. We've got soft white wheat berries in here. And David needs to make his biscotti. And when you grind whole wheat berries, the bran is left in the flour. You have to sift that out in order to get kind of an all-purpose flour. So here's my hand sifter. He's just going to scoop in some of the fresh ground flour. He's going to sift it, and the flour will come out of it, and the bran will be left behind. And so that is what he's going to do, because if you bake with the bran in, while it's really nutritious, your recipe won't necessarily come out exactly like it would with an all-purpose flour. For my breakfast, I'm having the leftover hot cocoa and marshmallow fluff while I'm talking to David, because this hand sifting can be quite time-consuming. We need to get an electric sifter for sure. But as you can see, there is that bran. That's what it looks like when it's left behind. And then there is the softer, fluffier flour. And then we save that bran. It won't be wasted. We just put it in a container and stick it in the fridge. And then if we want to make bran muffins, we can do that. We can just add it to our oatmeal. Lots of uses for the bran. So that definitely doesn't get wasted when we do our sifting. So if you have a good electric sifter, please let me know in the comments one that you like, because I've been reading reviews and trying to figure out which one to get, and I just don't know where to begin. So yeah, as you can see, this is really time consuming when you do it by hand. So an electric sifter would make our lives a whole lot easier. All right, looks like he got the flour measured out for his biscotti. There's all the bran that we have left, and we'll get to that later on. For now, though, I need to get some leftovers that are piling up in the fridge, get them in the freeze dryer. I've mentioned before that we have a Harvest Right freeze dryer. This is a great way to clear your fridge out of your leftovers. So today we're going to do leftover split pea soup, the leftover rice from the nachos that we had made on Tuesday, the leftover borscht from last night, and some leftover oatmeal from Monday. And each one of those will go on one tray, and we're just going to get that in the freeze dryer. So all I do is spread it out directly onto the tray. Now to do the borscht, I am going to remove the layer of fat off of the top, because high-fat foods don't freeze dry and don't store as well. So we definitely remove that layer of fat before we put it in the freeze dryer. And when we do it, look at how beautiful it looks. I love the color of beets. So all right, we're going to stick this in the freeze dryer, and it will probably take, about 18 hours for all of this to freeze dry. And then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this afterwards. This is such a great way to not have any food waste. When you have just these little amounts of food that are left over, and it's not enough for a full meal for your kids, you can freeze dry them, get them in Mylar, and nothing goes to waste. All right, it's all done. And let me show you what that looks like when it comes out. There's the split pea soup. The beautiful borscht. It's even more vibrant when the water's out of it. Look at it. It's just such a pretty pinkish purple. We've got our rice, we've got our oatmeal, and we've got our soup. And as you can see, when it's freeze dried, it will literally just come out like one big chunk like that. And you can break it off, and you can even eat the oatmeal raw. That's how my kids prefer to eat it, like that, just without rehydrating it. But what we're going to do is get these in Mylar. I've labeled them. I can fit about one tray worth into 2 bags. And then we're just going to portion it out, put an oxygen absorber in, and we're going to seal this off. And these are going to go into our long-term food storage. I talk a lot about my short-term food storage here, and that's what I'm eating off of in the Pantry Challenge. But I don't talk much about my long-term food storage. Okay, and we're going to show you, Gabe wanted to try some of the oatmeal rehydrated, so I just added a little bit of warm water. It wasn't super hot, and it will rehydrate more quickly the hotter the water is. But he's just kind of mixing that around, and as you can see, it's turning right back in to oatmeal. I need to hold the bowl for him so he can get that stirred. And then he wanted to try it to see what it tastes like, and I'm actually curious too. So let's see how he likes the rehydrated freeze-dried oatmeal. He said it tasted just like regular oatmeal. And then he wanted to try a little bit of the split pea soup too, so also really good. Yeah. All right. So there we go. Half of a tray can fit into a bag. Toss an oxygen absorber in there, and then we have this thing called an impulse sealer. It comes with your freeze dryer, and we just seal the Mylar bag down. And once this is properly sealed, this can last in storage for 20, 25 years. So essentially what you're making is an MRE. And that's why this is a great way to use your leftovers. Look, now he's just eating oatmeal plain. Like I said, it's really good that way too. So I know a lot of people have expressed concern about doing a pantry challenge and using up all of their food stores, but this is where long-term food storage comes in. Even though I'm using up the food in my short-term food storage right now because it needs cycled through, I'm still able to put food away into my long-term food storage. So this is stuff we would use in an emergency. This is stuff that Adam takes the kids camping every year, and he'll just grab meals from this that they have. They can just add hot water to it, and they can have home-cooked meals on the go. So love my freeze dryer. If you need more info, check the description. Okay, friends, that's it for this week, and I think it was a good week. There are so many blessings that come out of this challenge for me, and I feel like one of them is that every year I discover new ways to use food that I didn't previously realize. And I guess this week the big discovery was that failed batches of mayonnaise actually taste delicious in eggs, and specifically in the egg casseroles. It makes it so fluffy and wonderful, so I will never waste those failed batches again. If you guys make homemade mayo, you know that sometimes they don't always emulsify correctly, and in the past I would just kind of pour that into the chicken bucket and it would kind of absorb into whatever breads and things were in there, and so it wasn't truly wasted because the animals would eat it and then it would turn into eggs or meat or whatever. But I would rather feed it to my family because there's a lot of oil and things that go into that. And it made the most delicious and fluffy eggs. So I will never waste that failed mayonnaise again. And that's one of the things I love about doing this challenge, is that every year it seems like I discover new ways to be a little more resourceful with the food that we have and to waste less. And it's such a blessing. So hopefully you guys are finding the same blessings coming out of doing the pantry challenge as well. And all right, guys, I'm going to get inside and get warm. I hope that all of you that were in the path of the storm that happened last week are all safe and warm in your homes too. And yeah, all right, guys, we will see you next week with more meals. Until then, have a great week.